You're watching Africa News, bringing you the top stories on the continent this hour. Peace talks between South Sudanese rebels and a government delegation continue in the Ethiopian capital this Tuesday, but there's a sticking point: they can't agree on the release of political detainees. Thousands of asylum seekers demonstrate in Tel Aviv for a third day of protests against Israeli immigration policies. They're angry about the detention of illegal immigrants without trial. And Orthodox Christians worldwide are celebrating Christmas Day. The date is linked to the Julian calendar, predating the Gregorian calendar, which is commonly observed. Hello and welcome. Firstly, South Sudanese rebels and a government delegation continued peace talks in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, this Tuesday, aimed at halting 3 weeks of violent unrest. The two camps, though, have yet to come up with a viable truce agreement. Ethnic violence, which pits President Salva Kiir Adinka and his ex-deputy Riek Machar Anua, has left at least 1,000 people dead and 200,000 have fled their homes, while aid workers warn a humanitarian crisis is looming.
Food for the first time in days. Like him, more than 2,000 South Sudanese have found refuge here in this makeshift camp in neighbouring Uganda. Maddock spent 14 days on the road before crossing the border. He came from Jonglei, South Sudan's largest and most populous state, now under rebel control.
Or after I settled my family, I want to go back to the war, to liberate my people.
Violence broke out more than 3 weeks ago. It started off as a power struggle between President Salva Kiir, here on the right, and his former number 2, Riek Machar, on the left. But the conflict is fueled by ethnic rivalries. According to the UN, an estimated 1,000 people have been killed and 200,000 displaced. The international community warns that South Sudan is on the brink of a civil war.
There's very little access to the people who are now vulnerable. The fighting has prevented humanitarian workers moving in, and until we get a ceasefire, there's always just that threat of a further degeneration into even more violence.
South Sudan gained independence more than 2 years ago, but the world's youngest nation remains marred by political, social and economic crises. Government and rebel negotiators have started peace talks in Ethiopia. Their aim, agree on a truce and find a political solution. But time is ticking. On the ground, rebels are reportedly making advances towards the capital, Juba.
Well, meanwhile, negotiators from the regional grouping of East African nations that initiated those talks in Ethiopia also sent envoys to Juba today. Now, the move is aimed at encouraging President Kiir to free 11 political detainees, something rebel leader Riek Machar has demanded as part of negotiations. Well, that request is proving a major sticking point for both sides. Earlier, I spoke to Io Johnson, a specialist in African affairs. He's in London.
It's going to be very difficult because both leaders would have to climb down from the existing positions. And of course, Mr. Machar has made it very clear he wants these prisoners released. Mr. Salva Kiir says no way. So it's a very difficult position. It makes things very complex. But ultimately, I believe that both leaders will see above and beyond their current position. And hopefully, we may find a resolution to this crisis.
Now, Io, both sides are clearly under quite a lot of diplomatic pressure to end the fighting. But how much weight does that diplomatic pressure actually carry?
It carries quite a bit. Both leaders have expressed their existing positions. And of course, international pressure is being applied from the French, including the Europeans, not to mention the Americans and the Chinese, who are key stakeholders. So I believe the pressure would be what will determine the future of South Sudan. But ultimately, peace is required right now because the vast majority of South Sudanese are either fleeing in all directions for safety, and ultimately the fighting still continues, which is a real shame altogether.
In other news, Zambian police have arrested and charged an opposition leader with defamation after he likened the president to a potato. Frank Bawumia, head of the Alliance for a Better Zambia, allegedly referred to President Michael Sata as a chumbo musholwa on live radio. That was on Monday. Now, the Bemba term literally means a sweet potato that breaks when bent. It's used to describe someone who doesn't heed advice. If convicted, Balalwa could face up to 5 years in jail. Now, thousands of African asylum seekers demonstrated in Tel Aviv this Tuesday for a third straight day of protests against Israeli immigration policies. The demonstrators, mainly Eritreans and Sudanese, are furious about a law allowing illegal immigrants to be detained for a year without trial. Well, migrant leaders say protests will continue until Israel cancels that legislation and starts reviewing requests for refugee status. Earlier, I was joined by Dawit Demuz, an Eritrean asylum seeker in Tel Aviv, and he describes what migrants in Israel are actually asking for.
We are demanding the Israeli government three basic things, and these things are, first of all, to cancel the new law, to cancel the new amendment, which allows the prevention of anti-infiltration law, which allows detaining asylum seekers without trial. And second thing is to check our asylum request in a fair and transparent way. Third is to give us the basic human rights, the basic refugee rights, including the right to work, health service, and education and other things. So that these are the basic things that we are asking the Israeli government.
So, Dawit, a clear list of requests there. Now, Tel Aviv was the scene of race riots in 2012. Has anything, as far as you're concerned, changed? And indeed, could such rioting happen again?
Yeah, in this year, we show the Israeli government play a great blame game on the media, and especially the South Tel Aviv. They all the time said that we are the problem of, we are their problem, because all the time the government said that we are criminals, we are as a main creation of their problem. But we showed them in this 1 year from last year that happened, and we showed them that we are not criminals. Especially these days, they saw that thousands of refugees demonstrating without violence. For example, we made a demonstration yesterday in front of the U.S. Embassy, and only 5 people from this South Tel Aviv neighborhood come to demonstrate against us.
Dawit,
and we show them that we are...
Just a third question. Sorry to cut you there. We are running out of time. Finally, Benjamin Netanyahu has said very clearly, despite these protests, it's not going to change anything. What's a brief reaction from you on that?
Our reaction for this is, as he said, even though they are demonstrating and even though they are making a strike, they will not face, but we will also continue. Our reaction is we will continue struggling until the Israeli government changes its mind, until Netanyahu changes his mind and check our asylum request in a fair and transparent way, and to give us the basic human rights, the basic refugee rights. We will not keep quiet. We will continue struggling until the end.
Now, Orthodox Christians worldwide have been celebrating Christmas Day to remember Jesus Christ's birth, as described in the Christian Bible. The date relates to the Julian calendar that predates the Gregorian calendar, which is commonly observed. Ethiopians celebrated with singing, dancing, traditional dress and, of course, home-cooked meals. Claire Williams reports.
On a rugged hilltop in Ethiopia's Amhara region, an enormous Greek cross, symbolising Noah's Ark, dug 25 metres into the rock. 12 windows for each apostle. This is the Church of St. George. It's one of 11 monolithic churches in the town of Lalibela, carved out of red volcanic stone in the 13th century. It's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The churches were built below ground level, partly so enemies couldn't see them. Services here haven't changed since the churches were dug out some 800 years ago. Lalibela has around 20,000 permanent residents. At Christmas, tens of thousands of pilgrims arrive in town. Some have travelled hundreds of kilometres by foot. They wait in line for hours to get inside. Disto Ismail is a deacon at one of Lalibela's rock-hewn churches.
I'm proud by Lalibela because, as you have seen today, too many people come to Lalibela because now we have a new Jerusalem. We thought that if we came to here in Lalibela, we are blessing here.
According to church traditions, Lalibela became the new Jerusalem when Muslim forces took Jerusalem in the 12th century, meaning Ethiopian Christians could no longer go there. Pilgrims and the odd tourist spend Christmas night at the churches, where chanting and singing goes on throughout the night.
Well, that's where we leave it for today. More from your Africa team tomorrow at the same time. See you then.